Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and welcome to another episode of Virus Investigations, ladies and gentlemen. The series where I feel like a teacher, a vigil maining teacher, ladies and gentlemen. But today, I always feel like when I do one of these videos, to be honest, I feel like I am sort of teaching something, as horrible as I might be as a teacher. Sometimes maybe what I say gets through. Okay, basically the message is just don't download dumb shit at the end of the fucking week, and hopefully it works. But today we're talking about zip bombs. I know the last weeks we've been talking about something random, like really violently bad viruses, and some really harmless ones. And this one is, well, pretty harmless to the well, we'll discuss how. Ladies and gentlemen, the zip bomb is one of the oldest known viruses. It's not so effective anymore because we're in the modern times, we know about zip bombs, and they're incredibly easy to counteract. But they're an interesting set of viruses that are kind of going to blow the minds of some people who maybe don't know much about this stuff. But let's get down to how this works. So before we continue this, we have to talk about compression. You know what compression is. Compression is how you make that larger file smaller, and it works in millions of ways, and there is a guarantee you've always been dealing with compressed files. For example, when you take a photo on your cell phone, the photo is compressed down to a JPEG, right? Which is a picture format that is friendly with compression, I guess you could say, certainly to a device. Nowadays, if you have a more modern smartphone device, they might come with their own specific compression algorithms. I know iOS has, what is it, HEIC, which is high efficiency image codec or something of the sort, and Samsung I think also has their own, but I might not be sure on that. I know Google might also have their own too, but regardless, compression is working to keep your file sizes smaller so that you can store more on your devices. And same thing for your video games too. When you're playing a PlayStation 4 game, you might notice on the back of the box, some games say 50 gigs, some games say 20 gigs, 15, 10, 9, 6, 32, whatever. And oftentimes with games like that, you'll notice that there is a level of compression that goes into it. The textures don't look as good as they would be if you had, uncompressed textures, sound, all that kind of stuff, just so that they can fit on a disc. And it's been happening forever, especially as the gaming generation heads towards the end of the lifespan, where these file sizes get bigger as the content gets more impressive, as the content requires more fidelity and whatnot. So more techniques have to be used. Same thing with your PC files. You might notice you download things in .rar or .zip or .7z or tar.gz, whatever you want to call it. These are all compression algorithms, compression formats that are used to make those packages of files, those folders, appear smaller so that they can be uploaded to like Google Drive, Mega, any download site so that you can download them quicker. And compression is no magic, I guess you could say. It's actually incredibly complex. Let me get down to how compression works. So let's assume that a program has 16 pieces of data, right? Very layman's explanation. 16 pieces of data, and all those data can only be A, B, C, or D. So, for example, out of the 16 pieces, maybe 7 are A's, maybe 5 of those pieces of data is C, and the rest are B and D. So varying different amounts of A, B, C, or D. So the way a compression algorithm works is it looks into that data first, and it says, okay, well there are, say, 13 A's in this program. So what it'll do is, instead of writing 13 A's into the compressed piece of that program, the compressed version, the RAR or the zip file, I guess you could say, it says, instead of writing 13 A's as data, we'll write 1 A, but we'll make it, we'll put an identifier next to it and say, well, there are 13 A's, so when you're decompressing the program or unzipping it, unraring it, running it through WinRAR, or, 7-zip or whatever, then it'll unpack with all those A's because it has the identifier. So all of that combines to create a smaller size. Now, of course, the A's itself couldn't seem huge, right? And they might not be, but when you think of the volume of a program and how much data that exists that you can compress down, it actually makes a sizable chunk. In fact, when you're making a video, for example, a YouTube video of the sort, you might notice that some files may appear smaller or larger as you compress them or whatnot, or render them. That's because the program intelligently decides how to store the memory, how to compress the memory down. For example, there's nothing happening on that shelf behind me, so a video program might just make that a picture file in the actual video to conserve space. Now the computer's going to be a little crapped out and say, oh, something's moving, so it can't make that a picture file anymore. Now it can. So you get how compression sort of works in this instance. It's not a magic, it's actually pretty complex depending on what algorithm you go to. And some are more aggressive, some are more safer, some are better than others. But in the end, compression is no black magic of computers. Now that you know, we can move on to zip bombs. So one of the most popular types of zip bombs that you can just download and go ahead with is 42.zip. 42.zip is a file consisting of, well, just 42 kilobytes of compressed data, but what's within it is 5 layers of nested zip files. A nested zip file is just a zip file within a zip file. A nest just means something within something, I guess you could say. And eventually, when you're unpacking all these zip files, it is registered as 4.5 petabytes of data. And a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes, I guess you could say. 1,024. It's something around there. I guess you could say 1,000 terabytes just for argument's sake. That's a lot of fucking memory. I myself on a gaming rig probably have about 16 terabytes of space, so trying to unpack the zip file isn't going to really happen in today's modern day. Unless you have RAID arrays, unless you have just stacks upon stacks of interconnected hard drives working together, striped, I guess. It's not really going to work in that instance, okay? You're gonna run up so many resources that your system's going to end up crashing. So the way that it works is when you go looking inside your WinRAR program, your 7-zip, and open up something like this, and you try decompressing it, the problem is those files have to go somewhere. There's 2 places they can go. Straight into memory, which is usually what a decompression program will do. They'll put the files into memory, and they'll move it from the memory to your program as time goes on. The CPU is used to obviously run the decompression algorithm, but the memory is used primarily as a storage space. So if you have, say, 16 gigs of memory and you're trying to unpack all these behemoths, well, you're going to find out, wow, my 16 gigs of memory isn't enough. Or even beyond that, the program itself might not have a case to expand files to that size and might just crash the program there. If you have an older system, an older OS of Windows, so to speak, which doesn't really have the protections against this, then you're going to end up crashing that system down as well. It's no science. When you request that many resources and when you run a program to that limit, when you stretch it out, it's obviously going to crash something to the point that it's irreversible, and it's just, you're going to have to go for a restart. So it's not malicious in the sense that your files are going to get stolen. It's just your computer is going to be bogged down with so much crap that they can't really figure out what to do about it. This was especially bad for antivirus software, especially in the early days. You got to remember, when viruses come out, they have this grace period where they're necessarily unnoticed, I guess you could say. They are noticed, it's just not picked up for that little small period of time. So when the first zip bomb started releasing and, people were adamant in scanning these things with, I don't know, malware bytes at the time, or Norton antivirus, or fucking McAfee, then what happened was McAfee, Norton, all these antivirus programs would start to scan the zip file. And what they would do in order to scan the zip file was that they would extract them to a safe location, scan the files, shred them, and whatnot. So when they started extracting 42.zip, these programs didn't know if it was a malicious file or not. For all they cared, it was just an actual virus. So parsing that level and amount of information way earlier on in time, when computers didn't have the shit they had now, crashed computers down to the point that you had to do a reboot. Your antivirus program was screwed in the case of a zip bomb. And when it came time to unpacking it, the program just simply couldn't do it. You would be faced with buffer overflows, out-of-memory conditions, or exceed the amount of memory that you could use in a program in of itself, that it just bogged the whole OS down, and you just had to reboot the system at that point. Blue screen, or whatever you want to call it. And of course, the zip files will reach these 42 kilobytes that the programs will gladly accept because, of course, with compression, they're able to just put identical sets of data over and over and over again, so when it runs through a compression algorithm, of course it's going to go down to 42 kilobytes of space, because it's remembering that there's so much identical data that you can just compress all that identical data down and put it as an identifier. And once you put it into a decompression algorithm, you just don't have the space to get all those ones out of the situation, all that pieces of data that are identical to one another. Now, bombs like this are pretty similar in many other ways, shapes, and forms. You've got things like email bombs, which are literally designed to be DDoS attacks for email servers, sending large packets and volumes of emails to just one specific header address to completely bog down. There's protections against that, but it exists. You have logic bombs, which I guess is similar to what CIH and Petya were, which extracted themselves on a specific date. Logic bombs are a real thing. They're not just made up in Siege, I guess. even though that kind is a little iffy. Fork bombs and whatnot. You have many different types of bombs. Hell, you've got things like tar bombs, which are designed just to piss off the end user, I guess you could say. So while these things aren't malicious, they're an interesting look at what the older society of malware was like when it wasn't as harmless and full of ransomware. I mean, yeah, you do get different types of ransomware now, but back then people were just a little bit more creative because, again, these things flew way under the radar. If you tried running a zip bomb now through a antivirus program, they would say, yeah, it's a zip bomb. There's no point looking into it. They can easily identify it nowadays. But early on, it was all laissez-faire, ladies and gentlemen. And as viruses go, these ones were harmless. They were just designed to piss people off, really, I guess you could say, or, you know, maybe just make life a little bit more hellish for some people who were trying to figure out how to use a computer at the time. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit of a virus investigation's never hurt anybody. Let me know what you think about zip bombs in the comment section below, ladies and gentlemen. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, and please let me know what kind of virus you'd like to see in the next bits. I actually have some network-based viruses. I actually got like 8 VMs running right now on this system over here that are just loaded with a payload right now that's going to completely destroy 8 virtual machines all at once. It sounds sick, I know, but trust me, it's pretty exhilarating once you look at it. That being said, I'm going to go and have a nice little walk, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for showing up. This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.